as you know, a 2-day seminar about multisensory art, about synesthesia, about inclusivity, and also the technology that makes it all possible. So I'm Umut Eldem. I'm a doctoral researcher here at the Conservatory of Antwerp, and I'm joined by my co-organizers at Giusy Caruso and Geoffa in organizing this event. So before we begin with everything, I would really like to thank ISS, the International Association of Synesthetes, Artists and Scientists, for their contribution in organizing this event, and of course also ARIA and the Conservatory of Antwerp, of course, because that's where we are right now. So we have a 2-day program full of fantastic presentations. We have a really nice concert this evening at 7, also with a bunch of awesome multisensory works. And just a few things, right? So, of course, this wouldn't be a seminar if there was not a change in the program that I have to announce at the very beginning, right? So, in the program, it says that John Kelly is presenting today, but that will be tomorrow instead. And today we are going to have a fantastic earlier presentation by Cici and Concetta. Also keep in mind that we have a great exhibition space / quiet room at room 316. So if you go down the stairs, keep going forward, it's that open door to your left. We have amazing artworks from many artists. We have video artworks, video installations, also a few from the students here at the Royal Conservatory of Antwerp. So don't feel pressured to stay here the whole day. This is a very packed program. There's a lot of information. This is being recorded as well, so you can always watch it later. If you feel the need to just get out, stretch your legs a bit, sit down, it's completely okay. So I think that is it for the introduction for now. Our first keynote speaker is Tanaka, and to introduce him, I will invite Giusy Caruso on the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Giusy Caruso, concert pianist and postdoc artist researcher here within the group Yati and MATLAB. And I would like to thank you, my fantastic colleagues Umut and Geoffa, for organizing this amazing conference and you to be here. So in 2016, I was in Porto for a conference on gestural interaction and sonification of gestures. And I was very attracted by a workshop that show how we can use our body as an instrument. And then during the evening there was an astonishing concert, and the artist was Tanaka, professor at the media computing courses at Goldsmith University in London, who with great honor I'm pleased to introduce you today. And his talk presents how we can use EMG technology to create brain and body musical instrument. So with great honor we have here today Professor Tanaka. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you to Umut and to Giusy for the introduction, and to Geoffa, co-organizer. The three of them really put together a fantastic program that I'm looking forward to today. I'm sadly not able to join the program tomorrow, but I'm very interested to see everything else today. Now, I don't do synesthesia, but synesthesia involves multiple modalities of perception and sensing. And so what I thought I'd do is put together what I do in music interaction with the idea of multisensory interaction. And so here I have what I call multimodal musical interaction. And we'll get to the brain and body digital musical instrument. Seems to be a little feedback. Yeah, my voice is loud, so probably I can speak away from the mic. But before I do, I also wanted to show how we use some of these interactive musical instrument techniques in human-computer interaction research. So to get into this, I start with the idea that for you here in the conservatory, we all know, okay? Music, we know music. The proposition is the music is already multimodal. Music is not just about sound, It is, as we know, it's visual, it's tactile, and in fact it's social. So music is not a thing, it's not an object, but music is an activity. And this is what Christopher Small, in the classic book Musicking, puts forward. The idea of music as an activity, not as a thing. Now for many of you, I mean, I'm here preaching to the converted, but imagine if I had to make this proposition to computer scientists. So in my work, I take the idea that music is visceral, okay, that it has to do with the body. It engages our body, it creates experiences, and so I'm interested in a phenomenology of music. And so with all that, that's my approach to digital musical instruments, to try to create something visceral, phenomenological with digital technologies. Now, I'm not the only one doing this. This idea of DMIs, digital musical instruments, it's a discipline, it is a practice of making instruments, and it is now a research field. So the things I want to present are two things: the haptic wave. Okay. It's a haptic audio editing device, a way to work with communities of diverse abilities, as we'll see. And then the idea of the body as a musical instrument and the use of physiological signals of electromyogram in multimodal interaction with sound and with some applications of machine learning, as we'll see. So before we get into these two projects, just to do a quick wrap up on this idea of DMIs, digital musical instruments, and where it might connect to the field of computer science that we call HCI. But myself, having played piano and guitar all my life, tried to then extend the traditional instrument sort of performance practice to look for the same satisfaction in playing the musical instrument. But then to go beyond music to see where, with these technologies, there might be non-musical applications, for example, in rehabilitation. So why is this interesting? Okay. Biosignal computing, muscle interaction is a focus on the body. Although we have many sensors today, motion capture systems, computer vision systems, even sensors on our mobile phones that pick up the tilt and the rotation.
You see what I'm talking about? How this poem?
Oh yeah, that is also a poem, but it's written down now, or is it?
It was already there. It was already there.
Er staat dan ook in tv.
Oké.
Hallo. Hoi, je kunt gerust kijken.
Ja,
ik kan het gaan zeggen tegen mijn docent, ja, ik weet ook niet, die had gevraagd aan ons om bij in orde te brengen. Dus.
op voorhand.
Ja, ik zal het zeggen. Sorry.
Het is nog wel bijzonder voor de interviews.
Ja.
Dat is een nieuw systeem, is nog niemand in.
Ja, dat heb ik pas. Vangt voor 2 geleden.
seen a lot of visual art, perhaps, that are made by these GANs that do style transfer, taking a Van Gogh style and applying it to any kind of visual art. But somehow those works of AI art, you kind of have to take it on face value. You have to accept that they use some kind of AI technology. As a performer, I'm interested to expose the interaction with data. So if I'm navigating data sets, to show that as a process on stage. So instead of going on stage with a fully trained, what we call model, to say, hey, look, this is done with AI, we're going to use machine learning to map movements of the body to sound. Okay? I go on stage with an empty data set, a tabula rasa, and the composition of the piece and the performance that you see is a building up of that data set on stage. And this is the risk of performing, to go on with nothing and make the process of data collection, segmentation, and modeling part of the performance. Okay. So just to quickly summarize the electromyogram, we will use the myo. You will see my max patch, and I'll play two things. The first is not using the machine learning. It's a piece called Lifting, and it is kind of theremin, homage to the theremin, where the left arm will control the frequency of primary synthesis, the right arm will control amplitude. And I'm just using 2 channels, because this was a piece done with much, much older EMG technology. Then I'll play a piece called Delearn, which is using 8 channels of EMG, 4 on this arm, 4 on that arm, and the accelerometer, the inertial measurement unit of the device to get the X, Y, Z position, making it multimodal interaction, EMG and position sensing. That will go into concatenated synthesis called CatArt that was created at EarCamp. As we'll see, a synthesizer that takes an audio corpus as input, segments it, and creates an information space based on audio metadata. And then I will navigate that audio corpus through a neural network that maps then the metadata of my gesture, my body features, to the audio features. Now, if that sounds confusing, I will kind of explain as I go, but I hope still that it will be a kind of musical performance and not just a technology one. So what we're hearing is this piece of audio. This is an old piece for chamber orchestra that I made back in the day. In fact, it was played by a Belgian ensemble, the Ensemble Musique Nouvelle in Mons, with the studio Hartsoy in northern France. So this material, you're not going to hear the whole 18 minutes of the piece, but you hear the strings, you hear some of the brass instruments, and you can see where it's about to go. Let's say this is the original audio material. Just please keep this in mind. Because that'll be the second piece. But now, for now, let's see. I've got Max. Here we go. The risky business of doing everything. And that's why, as much as I promote my own EV board, I'm still using the Mayo. It is rather convenient. But they're breaking down now. I have 3 that I brought today. One of them stopped working when I walked into the middle of the stage. So I didn't know Bluetooth could get old, but it does seem to. Okay. So here's the SDK, commercial SDK. We will connect to that, and I'll say I'm going to use this device on the left arm, this device on the right arm. I will connect, and nothing happens. Interesting.
Do you have to toggle the screen?
Oh yeah, oh, there we go. Wrong button. Okay, so with the contrast, it's a little bit hard to see, but the green is a kind of oscilloscope reading. Okay, the 4 windows on the top are my left arm. Okay, so 4 channels around the perimeter of the lower arm, so I can tense some muscles and not tense others, whether I'm extending, okay, or pulling in. And we can actually hear this to see what does the raw muscle signal sound like. These are electrical impulses of the nerve cells. So not very musical, but inharmonic, stochastic pulse train. How do we take that and make it musical? The first thing that we can do is to smooth it. And so that same first channel that we see there can come out smooth. Okay. And I've got a smoothing figure here that I can make it less smooth and keep the jumpiness, or smooth it to give us a gentle curve that follows muscle tension. So that's the envelope of muscle tension. Muscle 1, muscle 2, muscle 3, and muscle 4. And then we've got a kind of calibration to look at the range, so we can calibrate for people of different force and different strengths. So with that, let's go to the theremin. Put that over here. It just steps us. So we hear a whistling sound. And the frequency will be controlled by the left arm. It's rather quiet, but it can get louder. And so in this way, it is as if we're playing the theremin. It's very simple. Inside, it's a bit more complicated than that. I don't even know where it is. Oh, yeah. Here's the actual granular synthesizer and many more parameters that are going on. But to give it that nice sound, we're not worried about it. The top level interaction is pitch and amplitude. And I will just, the piece consists of 3 notes. Okay? That's like a punk song, 3 chords. We've got this one. You'll see me click the pedal to get to another note, and then click the pedal again to get to the third note. And you'll see the smoothing settings change and the general frequency, the tessitura change. And so this is lifting. ode to the theremin. We'll now go into the machine learning, and I'll close then with the second piece. You'll remember the orchestra recording. Okay. So now, let's see if I remember. It's not often that in a concert you show your max patch, but since this is a conference, we try to perform and do the show and tell bit, all while trying to keep the music musical. Okay. So now we're starting to get into a much more complex space. For those of you who follow the work of Haverkamp, there are tools that are created there called Mugu.
we'll see, well, I'll explain a little bit what's going on here in a second. We'll just open the audio window. So first, here is where the sound corpus will go. And if I now go to this section of the concert, and then you see the sound loading in. Okay? And you see, in fact, it's the same waveform. So we've got the whole 18 minutes of the orchestra piece, but in the memory of this patch. It's been segmented, and we can see then here, keep an eye on this data index. It looks all red, but those are all little vertical lines. There's been an automatic segmentation of the 18 minutes of the audio into tiny, tiny audio grains that each have a data index, and that each have different audio features, okay, that will, 19 of them, 19 dimensions of audio feature that you see in the middle panel, duration, frequency mean, frequency standard deviation, etc. Each grade has been analyzed for those audio features. Now, what I will do so already this sounds familiar with the orchestra piece. We're probably playing one of the quiet segments near the beginning. But it's kind of still, it's looping. Seek 0, that's what we've done. Now, what's come to life is not the audio features, but the Mayo armband. So we have features of the gesture as well, but that are different from the features of the audio. We're dealing with the quaternions, so this is the X, Y, Z location of the sensor. And we have EMG channels 1 through 8, so how much on a tensor. So this is a very live signal. So the first thing I'm going to do is to, in performance, think of a posture that I want to associate with this sound. So let's just decide to do this here. And I'm going to hit the foot pedal, and you will see in number 4 there in the green a number of examples recorded of that associate the gesture and the sound. We've got 15. So usually I wouldn't be explaining this, this would be the beginning of the performance. I'll explain, and then at some point I'll stop explaining and just play. But we've recorded first position. Now we're going to go somewhere else in the music. So now we've come to some flute taps. We seek to 1. I'm going to find another position to associate with this and record that. So here's another grain, but each time these grains are very static because we're listening to individual grains. But now I want to bring in a little bit more performance interest. The left is going to do amplitude modulation, but of a static sound. And then we're going to record a position to associate with that. So the number of recorded examples is 29 now, and we've already gone to record, train, and play. So now, as I move, the audio features are moving as well. Because in capturing that last position, now we have 3 positions, and we've trained the neural network, and we're running it, and I will now be in a kind of interpolation space to explore. see, we find the anchor points. That one there, the flutes, the strings, the high ones. But we have things that we didn't have before, in between. And these are coming from other parts of the corpus that are in an information space. So now I'll stop speaking. We're going to go through the cycle 3 more times to pick other moments. It'll get more and more intense. I will train it with other positions, each time now adding to the data set, each time training and running the neural network. So this is something unusual for AI scientists to do, what we call interactive machine learning, keeping on adding to the data set and performing with it each time.
Parkinson's, where they have a wave amplitude signal that repeats from their brains. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I've not directly worked in a rehabilitation context. We do have a PhD student who's working with stroke patients and looking at, in stroke rehabilitation, we used to do different exercises to give mobility back. But if they're medically designed, they're rather boring exercises. So to keep the motivation up is a problem. So if you could do it with music, if you could do it with musical interaction, hopefully the motivation will be there, but we want to make sure that medically it's rigorous and it doesn't actually harm the person. Because I can get into some really weird positions, but we wouldn't want our stroke patient to do that. So that's the quick answer, but that's a very rich field, and Pedro Kirk is the PhD student who's working in that area, and we've got Blaise Sette at Queen Mary now, also picking up on the EVMG board exactly for this setting, so I can put you in touch with them. And then The other part of the question was...
Well, I was thinking of people with Parkinson's who have a repeating wave amplitude to their muscles, which is why they have the rhythmic Parkinsonian.
Yeah, so that's a problem of motor control, isn't it? And so again, there's no direct research that we're doing. In this case, I can't cite a PhD student or anything, but we know that music itself has been useful in treating Parkinson's to give a form of rhythm. Just by listening to music, actually there's a fantastic video where someone who's suffering from Parkinson's disease isn't able to get up from a chair in silence, but with music is able to get up and walk to the door. And that's fantastic work that I saw about a decade ago, and I would be very interested to deploy some of these technologies in furthering that kind of research.
Hello, son. Would you take a picture of me and my friend Carrie, and then I'll introduce the two of you?
Over 10 years ago, I started a abstract photography series of photisms when I was just starting to learn about synesthesia and know what it was, what it meant for me as a person and an artist. And I have that series named That Which Cannot Be Said with Words. And they all represent that very sort of fleeting, transparent, ephemeral side of what synesthesia looks like to me.
So there are a lot of interactions. That means you will not have an exact copy of your visual perception displayed on the paper. And then during the creative process, of course, you are observing it. So you're looking at your media material and you're looking what the brush is doing. And then you find that it's maybe not really optimal.
Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Susie Hart, and as Umut noted, I'm an artist and neurodiversity advocate with synesthete with many forms. The most predominant is mirror touch synesthesia. And this is Concetta.
Hi, I'm Concetta. Great to meet you all. I'm from New York City, and I've worked collaboratively with Cece to create an album of music called Mirror Touch, which we're going to tell you about a little bit more about today.
So, thank you so much. So the process for creating this album, actually, Concetta can dive in here, but we actually just met in person for the first time less than 24 hours ago. We did a lot of our collaboration, high tech these days with Zoom and other media. So why don't you talk about your creative process?
Oh, sure. I first read about mirror touch synesthesia when I was a teenager. I was reading a book by Oliver Sacks, famous neurologist. And it really spoke to me because I've always felt very extreme empathetic experience. And so the idea, the seed was planted in my mind a while back. And then that tied in with, as I grew and developed as a musician and a composer, answering some of my questions about why am I writing music? What am I trying to achieve, accomplish, and put out into the world? So I contacted Cece through some research. I found her name all over the internet about mirror touch synesthesia, and I called her and said, could you describe what the mirror touch synesthesia is like? And I could really identify with what she was describing. And I thought, how can I use my music to help other people better understand this extreme form of empathy and maybe even ignite the empathetic feeling in the listener of the music. So that's the gist of it.
So for those of you who might be unaware of mirror touch synesthesia, it's a distinct form of cross-modal processing, and it comes in different iterations. And so for somebody like me, I mirror propriocept, so I will move like the people that I see unintentionally. My muscles will fire, I have no control over it. I also have classic mirror touch, and so there's a woman in the audience who's touching her hair, and you're doing that with your left hand, but I feel it on my right hand as you touch yourself, you touch your hair, the texture shows up for me on my right hand, even though you're using your left. And then I also have mirror sensory pain, and so when I see someone else's injuries, I not only feel them in the zone where they might have that injury, so perhaps you might have a cut on the palm of your hand, I would feel it there. I also feel shocks of electricity that travel down the back of my body, and they follow the peripheral neural pathways. It's been with me since childhood. It's consistent over my lifetime. This is a classic experience with mirror touch. In research by doctors Michael Banassi and Jamie Ward, Michael is from the Goldsmiths at the University of London, and Jamie Ward is at Sussex, University of Brighton. Their research shows that people who have mirror sensory or mirror touch synesthesia have increased empathic ability. And the result of their research shows that, that increased empathy is consistent with the notion that we empathize with others through a process of simulating their experiences within our own mirror neurons. And so let's go from there straight into punk rock music, because I think that's a lovely place to jump off. We empathize with others through a process of simulation. This photograph is from San Francisco, from an event called the Punk Rock Homecoming. San Francisco was a hotbed for punk rock music. And at this event, I was really struck by this photograph of someone in the audience reaching up toward the musician. That impulse to touch, that impulse to find connection is, it's inherent, it's in us. We all have mirror neurons. But this impulse to find connectivity with a musician in this setting is quite interesting, because I think with a music like punk rock, we don't have those performative social constrictions that we often have with classical music, where the audience holds their space and the musicians hold theirs. Punk has always sort of pushed boundaries. And this idea that someone would reach up out of the audience to touch the musician really struck me. And so, again, we empathize with others through a process of simulation. In this photograph from the Punk Rock Homecoming, this musician, Cecilia Kuhn, who is part of a seminal San Francisco punk rock band, is a completely different musical moment at this event. She's reaching out from the stage as she performs to touch the hand of someone in the audience, like this gesturing toward connection and empathy. So I was really struck by this image of Cecilia and the way that, for me, it embodies both my mirror touch experience and the concept of empathy. So what I did with that photograph, and by the way, this is Cecilia, and this is the band Frightwig, and they really were a thing. In fact, Kurt Cobain, when he was on MTV in 1993, and Nirvana recorded their live album, he wore a Frightwig t-shirt. So Frightwig was quite a well-known band at the time. So here's Cecilia. I took that photo and cropped it. I rotated it so that it appears that she's reaching down from the heavens. And then I took the photograph, layered it with pencils, erased some of the pigment, covered it in paraffin, and blasted it with a heat gun to create the artwork that's in our quiet room. And I wanted to show this piece today because it really speaks to me about the idea that ultimately in this artwork, it's a musician on stage reaching out to a person in the audience, because the process of participating in music, in musicking, as we learned earlier today, in musicking, it is empathic and interconnective.
Music can also be interdisciplinary. One of the ways that I can better connect with my audience is by bringing in other types of art besides music, besides vibration, to help translate the experience to any person in the audience. So I commissioned a visual artist to make some artwork in response to the songs on Mirror Touch. And so you'll actually see the postcards in the quiet room where you can see different close-ups of what is actually a larger painting. And then this is the album artwork. So I'm drawing in a visual element. If some people connect with the music in that way, they can flip through a booklet and see. Do you have some of the other?
Yeah, I do. I do actually, but
okay.
I've got a chance for you to talk about the composition next. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
I also wanted to mention that the other interdisciplinary elements that are brought in are storytelling and performance art when it is performed live. And I loved what Peter was saying about how stories influence the future, because that's also a really deep part of why I put storylines into my music. Did you want to, oh, here we go. Okay, so this is a little bit about like the actual nuts and bolts of making these compositions. They fit into what I might describe as a genre of art song. They're using lyrics as part of as a way to influence the melody of the music. I'm using acoustic 5-string violin and my voice, and that's a personal choice because I grew up playing and singing as a really symbiotic connection. I really think of, in the same way that technology is an extension of our bodies, I really think that my violin is an extension of my voice, so I'm performing in that way. And then I'm using some woodwinds for different sounds and textures, and using a lyrical process called word painting. And I like to call it word painting because what I'm talking about when I say storytelling isn't a hardline narrative structure. It's a series of words that evoke meaning for different people, and it's flexible enough that many different people can connect to the storyline and actually put their own storyline into the music. So if I say a word like green, what are some other words that come up for you? You can just shout them out.
Grass.
Grass. Anything else?
Poison.
Poison.
Green, as such, green.
So like
Nature.
Nature, right? Like poison, nature, grass. You can have two completely different interpretations if it's just one word. Now if I juxtapose that word with another word, like if I say green bird, then what do you think? Jack and the Beans. So you have all these other associations that will come up. And actually music is like that too. Like if I use a C major chord, that seems pretty simple, but there's a lot packed into a C major chord. We have all kinds of emotional associations with really basically simple, what we might call simple things. There's many, many, many experiences packed into those things. And so I'm starting from a very minimal place with both words and music to invite people to co-compose as they listen to these pieces. So I think of it as word painting and sound painting, and then here's the actual painting, which is my friend Dorothy Rojas, who's a wonderful visual artist, made this painting in response to the different songs and stories on the album. So if you, I actually have some copies of the album if you'd like. They're actually booklets that have the artwork printed with the lyrics alongside them, and you can flip through it as you listen to the music on the album. Did you want to say something else?
No, I actually thought it'd be a nice chance for you to play.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to play an example of one of my compositions. The piece I'm going to play for you is not actually from Mirror Touch, but it's using a lot of the same techniques, and it's from my earlier album, which is called Falling in Time. And if you stick around at 7, I'm going to be playing with some of the woodwind students at the Conservatory for the concert tonight to play some of the pieces from the Mirror Touch album. The piece I'm going to play for you now is called Falling in Time, and it's kind of meant to invoke the kind of delirium and confusion you might feel when you're falling in love, but also when you're losing love all at once. And I hope that makes sense, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. I'm not the answer that you'll find, only to wander and unwind. And many days are many lines, too many roads that we could climb.
He's at the University of Sussex, Brighton, and for those of you who are interested in learning more about mirror touch synesthesia, I highly recommend you research Ward and Fantasy in the work that they've done in this field. Now we would love to thank Geoffa and Giusy and Umut for organizing Convergence, and we're really grateful to the Conservatory for the chance to be here. And as noted, Concetta will be playing in the concert later, which will be really quite wonderful. And if you'd like to find either of us, this is where we can be found. What a pleasure it's been to finally get to do something with you after all of our years of talking together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Case, the architectural structure of a notation, musicians automatically feel different. They already use space differently, they consider sound differently, they reflect on the way that they're considering sound differently. And I applied this with the Pixievisor software that I was just showing you that I used in seeing sound performance to create an additional sense of feedback that would help to give the musicians a type of reciprocal dynamic feedback that could potentially influence the way that they play. I'm not being dogmatic about telling them that the visuals are kind of a system that they should be playing to, but rather that this would be a kind of recognition that there is a process at play and therefore changing their musical phenomenon thus. So, Soundaryalahari 1, I'll go into technical details a little bit about it. Soundaryalahari 1 was a bit of instrument building, a bit of audiovisual instrument building, and you can see this is a performance in Edinburgh at the Reed Concert Hall, and it's utilizing 2 pianos and the Pixievisor system. And in this, the Pixievisor is represented by the screen up above.
two-way audio-visual designer that we just had this great presentation on. I'm halfway into a presentation with Svetlana, who was briefly here yesterday. So I made a silent video that kind of mimicked the Northern Lights, and she composed what it sounded like to her. And then the second half is I'm going to take that soundtrack and I'm going to animate, synesthetically, like what goes on in my head, and it's going to look completely different. So that exchange is really exciting. So in the spirit of this conference, once I finish that, I would have room for more collaboration, or even questions and things, because there were a lot of people here who kind of synesthesia was sort of like a part of what you were doing. So I have some cards I'll leave up here next, where they're definitely inferior to John's beer mats, but so if you want to contact me, or I have other stuff on my website if you're kind of curious about it. And I also have like information and links to other synesthesia resources, if that would be helpful to anybody. So.
Okay, thank you. Little tiny extra presentation there. I thank a few people, right? So first of all, my two co-organizers, Giusy Caruso.